From the shadows where the whispers grow, through the night where the warriors flow, feel the power in the tales untold. Lord Ninja Choke takes a strong hold.
Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Lord Ninja Choke MMA Picks podcast. I'm Will, I'm from the UK, and I'm joined as always by Josh in Australia and Dom in the US. So after a fun event last weekend in Paris, France, we're back to America, to Texas for Noche UFC, which is headlined by Diego Lopes and João Silva in an all-Brazilian affair. As always, before we get into the upcoming card, we'll take a quick look back at last week's results. So we, as always, had 3 picks on the UFC Paris card. I went with the main event and chose Nassourdine Imavov, which was obviously a winner, with Josh picking Mauricio Rufy in the co-main event, which unfortunately didn't quite work out, and a value underdog spot on Bolaji Oki against Mason Jones, also unfortunately fell apart in the latter half of the fight. So moving on to our individual picks and predictions. I had a pretty good slate for UFC Paris. I've also included some Dana White's Contender Series winners here, but that's just for my own bookkeeping. Picks went 9-3, 8.7 units worth of profit from 17 units staked. So it was a pretty big card for me. I was going pretty crazy with some of the leans that I had. Lots of parlaying on bigger favorites. I was very confident in Modestas Bukauskas and the main event going over 3.5 rounds. So I was pretty aggressive with those. It was an interesting card. There was a lot of line movement, and it was a really fun one because I disagreed with all of the line movement as the week was going by. So I really had to bide my time and wait to pull the trigger on guys like Mason Jones and guys like Sam Patterson, who I thought deserved to be closer to the line that they originally were before the public were betting the underdogs. So really enjoyed going against the public on that regard. Everything went pretty well for me in regards to all the names I've mentioned. There were some downsides. The Andreas Gustafsson fight was very disappointing from both a fan perspective and a betting perspective. I thought that one could have been really interesting and could have worked in Gustafsson's favor, but it was over before it really started. And Sam Hughes to win by decision. My night got off to a really bad start, which was really disappointing because I figured she was going to be really dominant over Shauna Bannon, and she was, but she was too dominant. I didn't see a finish coming there. Bit of a shame. But yeah, overall, really happy with it. I think that might actually be my best event of the year so far. So feeling really good, hoping to snowball that into another successful event at Noche UFC. How about you, Dom?
Yeah, I had a lot riding on this card just because it was 2 weeks off, and I made a lot of bets, which maybe with a week I may not have made. But 2 weeks, lots of time to research, and some things worked out and some things didn't. I think near the end of the 2 weeks, I was getting really, really bored. I was looking into Reece McKee as a pick and bet him, and that didn't work out very well. I think he did what I expected of him. He was basically big and took a lot of punishment, and looked like he might have rallied in round 3, but the ref stopped the fight after he took a body shot. So it is what it is. I had bets on a number of underdogs. So I had Bolaji Oki, who at the start of the fight looked really good, and I was like, "Oh, of course, this is what I expected." But I also expected that Mason Jones, if he survived, would take over, and that's exactly what he did. And hats off to him. That was a great performance. It was a great fight and a crazy round. I was trying to think, have I seen a round that crazy recently? I definitely haven't recently. I remember many comebacks, of course, where someone gets rocked. Like Hooker and Poirier coming back. Or the famous Gaethje and Johnson fight. But I think that happened in different rounds. I don't know if it was one crazy round. Obviously, there's the famous classic Pat Barry and Czech Congo. That was definitely one crazy round. But this was an absolutely crazy round where both fighters got knocked down and the fortunes got reversed within 5 minutes. You had Imavov at plus money. I had Sam Patterson money line and in some parlays. I tailed the Brychek pick just in a safer manner. I had scorecards, no action. And I had quite a lot riding on Modestas Bukauskas parlay with Sam Patterson, and he came through. And it did seem, as you just mentioned, Will, that Sam Hughes was basically the lock of the card, and probably maybe could have invested a bit more in her. But I had a parlay with Gomis, and Yeah, overall it was a good night, and looking forward to the next card. How did you do, Josh?
Yeah, I did pretty good. Most of my, well, all of my locks landed. First of all, I'm always very lock heavy when it comes to these cards, but this week, only 2 locks, and well, both of them won, so that brings up my record to 68 and 13. My prediction accuracy was relatively good as well. I mean, 10 out of 13 fights correct, 1 perfect, being the Solar KO round 3 pick, and so that brings my accuracy up to 64.8, which is relatively good. I mean, we're getting back to the 65% range, so that's good. But the bad stuff is that my parlay missed straight off the bat. Like, well, it crumbled, so I was pretty peeved off about that. But then I kind of made up for it by the alt bets hitting. So Deleja KO round 1 and round 2 that hit, and then much bigger, I guess, the BSD sub at 6.50 hit for $19.50. So I'm pretty happy about that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm pretty happy about how things went last weekend.
Yeah, some pretty good results all round. Yeah, happy days. So moving on to Noche UFC. How do we feel about this card? I personally find it a little bit jarring as somebody who doesn't live in the US to see a card that's like based around Mexico and South America to be taking place in North America. But I guess obviously it's the south of North America, so you have a large cohort of people who are probably up for it in that regard. But yeah, looking at the card, anything stand out to you guys? What do you like?
When it comes to the UFC Mexico cards, the one thing that always stands out to me in general is that, Dana White back in the day was like, oh, UFC Mexico is going to be so big. We'll have a UFC PI and all that stuff. We'll have all these stars coming out from that area. And then he makes shit like this. And then you look at the prelims, so like Claudio Puelles and below that, it's absolutely, yeah. Right. I mean, it's kind of like when you walk on the sidewalk and you see a piece of dog shit on the floor and you're like, I don't want to step in that. You kind of like dodge it widely. That's this whole card for me, really. Well, not whole card, but the whole prelim card. So anything in the main card's fine, but then the prelim is just, I could wake up during the main card because, I mean, these events start really early for me and I'll be like, that's cool. I didn't miss out on anything. I mean, who wants to watch Cedricus Dumas fight Zachary Reese, or who the hell is Rodrigo Cezinando versus Daniil Donchenko? Like, where are we? Are we at the UFC or are we like KSW? What's going on here? Like, what's happening? So ultimately, this entire card is just average from bottom, and then it gets mildly better, only mildly, as the fights go on. So yeah, that's my rant for this card.
Yeah, I don't have anything ranty about this. I just think it's like Will said, it's curious. It's a Noche card. It doesn't seem like there's that many actual Mexicans on this card that are not sort of raised in the US, like Gastelum, who we know is Mexican, but I think he was born and raised in the US. I don't think Alexander Hernandez is like, he might have Mexican blood, but he's obviously as well born and raised in the US. And then, like Diego Lopes is Brazilian, Puelles is Peruvian, Silva's Brazilian. I guess Tatiana Suarez, maybe she's Mexican, but she's definitely born and raised in the US. So I don't think it doesn't feel like a really strong Noche card from a Mexican perspective, anyway. But yeah, I think it's not the worst card I've seen, but I think I largely agree with you, Josh. It's not something to write home about, basically.
I think it's really interesting how, as the UFC's narratives kind of changed, certain countries come in and out of focus. I mean, if you were to rewind like 18 months, 2 years ago, you had Yair Rodriguez was like an interim champion at one point. Obviously, Alexa Grasso had the belt for a certain amount of time. Diego Lopes has always been really hyped up and really like on the periphery. I know he obviously is Brazilian, but I think he has like a sort of dual identity thing, and that he is also slightly Mexican. there's somebody else who I'm forgetting. But yeah, there basically did used to be a lot of like Mexico was in its prime a couple of years ago, but it's really fallen off. I mean, you know, you see what happened with France yesterday. I mean, yesterday, last week, the crowd was really behind it, and obviously the French fighters were really doing quite well. And I think that there's the doors wide open for France to be a spot that the UFC repeatedly comes back to. Maybe at a more consistent rate, but it only really means that if the fighters who represent that nation can really stay at that top level. And I think Mexico's kind of fallen off. Brandon Moreno, obviously, how could I forget? He himself has also taken a step back. So yeah, Mexico isn't really what it used to be as an identity in MMA. But anyway, we're going to break the fights down regardless. So as always, you know, well, not as always, we're doing something a little bit differently here. We're going to start off with the main event, despite the fact that it's not one that the three of us have individually chosen. We feel like we have to take a look at the main event, given that our podcast namesake, Jean Silva, is taking place. So, the main event of the evening is Diego Lopes versus Jean Silva. This fight should be chaos. I'm really intrigued to see how it all goes down. I think we've got two fan favorites who are possibly the UFC's most sought after rising stars in the last couple of years. The two of them bring the noise, they bring heat, they know how to throw down, and here they are in a 5-round main event. I think it's a very interesting fight because I think a lot of people are going to possibly overreact to the Fighting Nerds and what happened to them in Paris, obviously with Mauricio Rufy and Caio Bahayo both losing in back-to-back co-main and main event spots. The Fighting Nerds have had this aura about them. Everyone talks about how they're revolutionizing the game and that they can't lose and that they're the real sort of next generation of MMA. And it's easy to say it now, given that the two of them have lost, but I never really bought it. I always thought there was just something like a bit over the top. And it feels like the UFC have gone with this narrative. The guys are very marketable, the whole glasses shtick and the small like group of stars who are all producing finishes and looking great. It was basically like a dream for the PR team. And I think everybody started drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. And I mean, the Rufy one was particularly bad because there was a clear gap in our knowledge of him, and it got exploited. But anyway, I think people possibly may overreact to it the opposite way. You know, they might think, well, now's the time to fade him. They've lost 2 in a row, so people will perhaps be leaning towards the Diego Lopes side. But the only real argument you can make in that regard is that has something happened at the camp? Has it turned toxic? Or is Jean Silva going to be mentally affected by seeing his two colleagues lose their really important and pivotal fights? I don't think so. I think that basically you should just forget about last week and just pretend like this is a standalone fight, because it is, and all that stuff is just noise. That being said, I think the odds for this fight are pretty ridiculous. So currently Jean Silva is like minus 275, which I think is pretty insane. You know, you look at the hype that I was just talking about. I think that is very heavily baked in here, because when you look back at like the last 6 months of both guys, Jean Silva has had a real sort of like standout performance against Bryce Mitchell. We all know and love that. I obviously did, especially with that bet on the ninja choke. But like Diego Lopes, on the other hand, gets his big spot against Volkanovski and loses across 25 minutes to a guy that we're kind of thinking is kind of on the decline a little bit in Volk. So one guy's stock is very low and the other guy's stock is sky high. And I think that the betting odds really obviously demonstrate that, because when I think about this fight going down, it's just going to be chaos, you know, like both of them are probably going to just love the idea of standing in the pocket and swinging big and like really, really trying to put it on each other. And I just think that is a fight where all sort of like logic, reason, and sort of technique and skill and game planning probably goes out the window a little bit. And those are a lot more high variance, and either man can come away with it. Diego Lopes is, supremely dangerous, as is Jean Silva. But this is the first time that Silva probably is going to have to respect an opponent a little bit more than he usually does. I don't think we will see quite so much walking down and barking at him, because Diego Lopes will be there in the center to meet him, and they're going to have lots of car crashes, as people like to often say. And obviously, from a grappling threat as well, Diego Lopes is an incredibly opportunistic submission game. I still think that finish over Gavin Tucker it's sublime. Honestly, one of the best finishes I've ever seen from a submission perspective. And when I think about this fight going down, I do see Jean Silva as a little bit better. I think he's got more to his game that he can just utilize across a longer period. But I just don't think you can count Diego Lopes out. It's as simple as that. Also, I bet and picked Diego Lopes in that Volkanovski fight. And the one thing I think really let Lopes down is that he sold out his style, his buzzsaw like style for the over the nervousness of 25 minutes, and he tried to be a point fighter against Volkanovski, which is a really stupid thing to do. Obviously, point fighting here is not what anyone's really going to expect, and probably wouldn't be in either man's best interest. But in the same way that Lopes kind of struggled with that identity crisis, this is the first time we're seeing Jean Silva do 25 minutes, I think. And, does that mean that he has to approach things differently? Does he have any concerns about his cardio? Is he going to pace himself? Is he going to do this and that? It's different from what we're used to expecting from Jean Silva, in the same way that it was with Diego Lopes. If looking back on that Volkanovski fight, if we'd have known that Lopez's game plan was to manage himself across 25 minutes, I think a lot of people would have flipped to the Volkanovski side, and Volkanovski would have been a much more popular pick and bet, because that's not what we know Diego Lopes to be best at. If a fighter is going to go out there and offer plan B as their primary game plan, that doesn't sound great. And Jean Silva may end up doing the same thing. If Diego Lopes ends up doing that, at least he has experience in having done it, and I think his cardio looked quite good against Volkanovski. So overall, I do think Jean Silva probably gets the win. I think he is probably the better fighter when I think about the two of them going head to head, but I just don't think it's by much at all. And I think it shouldn't take much for Diego Lopes to really be asking some serious questions here. And there are still questions to be asked. It's a first 5 rounder for Jean Silva. So I took the stab at plus 230 on Diego Lopes for a single unit. I think it's, from a value perspective, I think it's the bet. I understand Jean Silva being the one to probably deservedly be the favorite. So I do understand picking him. So I will be picking Jean Silva to win, but I think the value from a betting perspective is all over Diego Lopes. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Whenever it comes to a very hyped fighter like Jean Silva fighting a much more cemented contender like Lopes, I can't help but think that it is a bit of a hype job, really. I mean, Silva does deserve to be in this kind of fight, but against Lopes, that's a bit iffy, because Lopes is coming off a competitive fight against Volkanovski despite losing. And stylistically, it could be fun, but I'll try my best to kind of break it down. The Silva's only significant wins are against fighters like Drew Dober, Melsik Bagdasaryan, and Bryce Mitchell. So those three are the only ones that really jump out at me in terms of his wins. I mean, Drew Dober is the IKEA version of Justin Gaethje. He gets hit a lot, so obviously Jean Silva's going to beat him up, right? That's just going to be the most obvious thing. Melsik Bagdasaryan, that was probably a much better win, because Bagdasaryan is a highly talented kickboxer, so obviously there was a lot of curiosity about Bagdasaryan and how he's going to fare against Jean Silva, and obviously he got his ass kicked too. So, Jean Silva is obviously beating these people. And then his most recent one was against Bryce Mitchell, in which case he ninja choked him. And even before that choke happened, Bryce Mitchell looked a bit lost, right? It was like a child in a supermarket looking around, where's my mummy, all that shit. He didn't really look like a top level contender that he used to look like, right? So Silva has answered a lot of questions regarding his ability to fight, but this fight against Lopes is his biggest step up in challenge by far. I expect Jean Silva to obviously be a bit more quicker, a bit more explosive and violent in the pocket, or perhaps entering the pocket, compared to Lopes, who with his reach is going to want to throw straight strikes, maybe a few teeps here and there, especially due to his height advantage. So it's rather interesting to think about how this fight's going to play out. I don't really see a finish happening early on because both are going to be highly respectful for each other's powers and each other's knockout ability and stuff. So if Silva is going to find a finish, I reckon it's going to be in the middle 2 or 3 rounds, say around 2, 3, or 4, maybe like around there. But it's just hard to say, really, because Lopes is that step up in competition that Silva needs to certify himself as a future contender. But on the side of Lopes, he is going to be testing John Silva's grappling, and I know that whole question about John Silva's grappling would have been asked when he fought Bryce Mitchell, but I mean it got answered. But Bryce Mitchell is not exactly the same level of grappler or wrestler as Lopes is, as well as the fact that Lopes has the reach advantage, which might help him get that body lock or whatever you want to say. Like, you know, anytime a bigger fighter has both a good grappling advantage and a wrestling advantage as well, I guess. You should always expect them to dominate when it comes to getting the fight to the ground. So ultimately, I do think that Lopes will be the one to force scrambles or force Silva to fight off his back or whatever. So he is going to ask more questions about Silva's grappling, which is going to be great. But then when you look at Lopes' fight, there are moments in which he is a bit too complacent on the feet. As Will said quite well, he played the point fight game with Volkanovski, and that's just stupid to do, right? So is he going to do the same thing against Silva and hope that Silva gasses out in the 4th and 5th round? I hope not, because that would be pretty stupid too. So this is a really, really tough fight for me to pick. I don't want to pick just yet. I got to do some more tape around this one, but I'm intrigued, but I'm also a bit iffy. How about you, Dom?
Yeah, so it's a low confidence pick for the podcast, as both the guys have said. We're not massively into this Jean Silva pick because he's a massive favourite. So I guess the only thing to do is really look at it from a betting perspective at this point in time. Stylistics have been broken down. At the moment, I believe Jean Silva is something like a -300 favourite. I think he opened at -200. So, I think it's going to keep going in that direction, even in spite of the losses that the fighting nerds have suffered last weekend. And so I was a BSD better. I actually forgot to mention that on my record. But yeah, I was betting on BSD because I saw that Rafa hadn't really proven himself at the UFC level in terms of grappling. So I think with this fight, I think there is a big step up in competition here with Jean Silva taking on Lopes. But I think Jean Silva has proven more in the UFC. So he's more deserving of his price tag at the 1.5 that he opened at. However, as this line is moving towards the 1.3 to the -300, I just feel that this is overblown. I think it's very hard to take this line, as I thought the 1.4 or whether it is -250 that Rafa was hard to take, because the only way you can take that line with Jean Silva is you really have to be expecting the early finish. So in terms of betting this, I mean, I do think that there's probably by the time that this closes, I think Diego Lopes will be a bigger underdog potentially. We'll see. In which case, I think there's probably just value playing the money line if he is end up like +250 or even +300 or something crazy. But if not, then I think there's this potential to wait and see and play it live, maybe. Just because I think Jean Silva has shown himself to be extremely competent over 3 rounds. There's no one can argue with that. He's got great takedown defense. He's got great power and strike accuracy. But we haven't seen him really, as Josh said, tested, in terms of grappling. So it could be interesting to see how Lopes approaches the fight. as you said, like the pacing, because this is going to be 5 rounds, and we haven't seen John Silva in the championship round, so he could be a complete gasser. He could like completely just gas out and get finished in round 4 by Diego Lopes, if Lopes can survive. So there is that question about survival here, because I think that John Silva is going to put it on him in a way that Ruffy wasn't able to with BSD. Having said that, I think Lopes could come out with a grapple-heavy game plan, but I think John Silva has shown himself to be better at grappling or better at takedown defense than Ruffy. So that's the only, well, at least we've seen him grapple with high-level grapplers, I should say, like Bryce Mitchell. And who else did he fight? I think you guys mentioned. Has he fought any other grapplers? He fought Bryce Mitchell. I guess Dober's technically a wrestler. Yeah, that's a bit iffy, really. Because in the Bryce Mitchell one, Bryce Mitchell said like he went down and weight, didn't he? Straight after that, I think he was like, "I'm done with this weight class. I can feel the difference." So, yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I'm looking at the records. He hasn't really fought anyone of the caliber of Diego Lopes. So, yeah, I mean, it's a low confidence pick for the podcast, and yeah, I think if John Silva doesn't finish early, this is going to be a super interesting fight. I haven't bet on this one yet. So I'm just going to break down this fight very high level. Rob Font versus David Martinez. This wasn't the fight that I was initially planning on talking about. I was going to talk about Suarez and Lemos, but this caught my eye because Rob Font was a big favorite when this opened. He was minus 200, and David Martinez was plus 180. So I thought, okay, I think Rob Font is the side, and he's probably going to steamroll this kid, this 27-year-old Mexican who's actually from Mexico, trains in Mexico. He's been fighting most of his career in Mexico. He has only fought 2 fights in the UFC, actually technically 1. The other one was a Dana White's Contender Series fight, so he's actually 1-0 in the UFC, up against legend, basically, Rob Font, who's 12-7 in the UFC. He's fought most of his career in the UFC. I think the issue really I have here is Rob Font is 38 years old. And even though he's having a kind of resurgence in his career, if you look at his record, even though he's been fighting very high level fighters, I will say, he's lost a lot recently in fights where he hasn't looked good. He has, won his last couple of fights. So he beat John Matsumoto in a decision fight, split decision, I should say, and that was somewhat controversial. I think a lot of people had John Matsumoto winning that fight. Before that, he beat Kyler Phillips. That hasn't aged so well. Vicinius obviously made Kyler look pretty average in their fight. Before that, Rob Font had lost to Davison Figueiredo and Corey Sandhagen. He beat Adrian Yanez, then he lost to Marlon Vera, and he lost to Jose Aldo. So he's losing just to the best of the best. So I'm leaning David Martinez here, just to sort of spoiler alert. Not with a great deal of confidence. This is a low confidence pick. As I say, it's a low confidence pick because we just haven't seen a lot of David Martinez. But I can tell you what I have seen in the fights that I've watched for David Martinez. So in his last fight, he took out Simon Oliveira in the first round, pretty devastating fashion. So we didn't learn a lot about him there. In the fight before that, his Dana White Contender Series fight, he was fighting. He was up against a wrestler. So he was skirting on the outside, keeping his distance and choosing opportune moments to enter the pocket and land damage on his opponent. He won convincingly. He has good grappling defense, so he managed to keep it standing for most of the fight. And he was landing some really nice leg kicks from the outside. That was what I noticed really in that fight. He really just picked his moments to land leg kicks. And beyond that, you have to look at his fights in Mexico in the Combate organization, and there he's fighting, not the highest level of competition. I think this is partly the issue, but you notice really he has the same style in all his fights. So that's the thing that's consistent. It's the lateral side to side. He just is non-stop moving. It's kind of somewhat to his detriment in the sense that when you're always moving, you can't throw, but on the other side, you can't get hit. So I think there's this potential that he could frustrate Rob Font just by constantly moving. Rob Font's obviously going to come forward. We know how Rob Font fights. He likes to jab, and really put pressure on his opponents. And I think that actually works well for this style, like in terms of Martinez just being able to just move and choose opportune moments to crash the pocket. Because when he does choose to go, he's highly accurate, highly powerful, extremely fast. He finishes a lot of his opponents, and but he picks the moments to finish. He seems to have this kind of knack, as I would say, of just being able to read a fight and know exactly what he needs to do to win. I think he's going to face an uphill struggle here because he's up against a vet. He definitely should be the underdog. However, I felt at like plus 180, and given Rob Font's age and potential, that he's taking a lot of damage recently. We've seen him wobble, we've seen him hurt. That there was a path to victory for David Martinez. So that's why I leant towards the David Martinez side. I'll hand over to Josh and Will for any final thoughts. Josh or Will?
Yeah, when it comes to this fight, it's a bit murky because there was a lot of cancellations on the side of Martinez and his opponents, right? I mean, he was meant to face Carlos Vera, and then that fight fell through. And then he was meant to fight Kwang Lee, and then that fight fell through. Or, well, yeah, it did fall through. But when it comes to those cancellations, it's just really hard to say, like, if he was preparing for those fighters and then had to, like, scramble to prepare for a new fighter, and it's just, it really, well, excuse my French, but, like, fucks with the whole camp, right? Because they obviously have a regiment of preparing for a certain fighter and stuff, and to go from Kwang Lee, who isn't too great of a fighter, to Rob Font, it's like, what the hell happened, right? Like, I expect Rob Font. I mean, I know that Dom is on Martinez here, but I don't think that picking Rob Font's a bad idea here. Only because he has the reach advantage, he has the experience in fighting all of these top talented fighters, and he has that gym, the New England Cartel, who obviously has an ability, or at least a great knowledge in preparing the fighters to fight these really talented young fighters. So overall, I don't have a real read here. I have to look into it more. But I do have similar concerns that Dom has when it comes to Rob Font's age and his ability to take punches. I mean, Martinez is very, very green. He's still very, very fresh. And I just don't know if he has what it takes to defeat Rob Font, who, he's so experienced. So I'm going to have to pass here in upvoting a confidence here. So, yeah. What about you, Will?
I haven't done any tape on David Martinez, and I don't really remember anything about his UFC debut or his Contender Series fight, so not really much I can say. I, again, just echo the same sort of thing. I think it is quite interesting that, with this fight being short notice and with, every other fight on the card being lined quite late, I question how much, like, knowledge the books really have on David Martinez, and it doesn't surprise me that him opening up as an underdog, like I think it was like plus 170, plus 180, absolutely nothing wrong with him being an underdog. You would expect, given the fact that both men have been training for a fight and that Rob Font is so much more experienced, you'd expect him to be the underdog. But what if he's special? We haven't seen enough of him yet, and the people who have seen more of him are the people who have done the tape. And those people who have done the tape and gone back and watched those Combate fights and the regional stuff seem to be betting David Martinez quite heavily. So that plus 180 that I referenced is long gone now. I think he's now sort of around the plus 140 range, maybe even trending further. Who knows? So for that reason alone, I did put a unit on David Martinez. I figured I could, do my own due diligence in my own time, because if the odds are going to shift that much, I'll either be able to arb out of it or just cash out for all my money back. But it looks like David Martinez may be pretty decent if those who have done their work. And early in the week, the early bets are usually from the more sharper gamblers. So I'm interested to see how this one goes down. I'm interested to go and do tape on Martinez myself and see what I think. But I currently have a unit at plus 170 on David Martinez, which is pretty nice. So I will be upvoting it to a 2 on David Martinez, just because. Yeah, could be an exciting prospect on our hands here, going up against a guy who we we probably should be thinking about from a fade perspective, because Rob Font does pull off the spoils the party every now and again, but he quite clearly is not the guy he was a few years ago, and that's only going to get worse with time. There's a decade age gap here, and maybe it shows. Who knows?
Yeah, just a couple of final points. Rob Font's actually training out TriStar, which is a really good thing for him, because I don't think New England Cartel is that great account for his whole career. I know that's what it says in Topology, but he's been training with Faraz Zahabi, and that's revitalized him. That's why he's managed to get these results. He's come with more intelligent game plans to sort of preserve his chin and find ways to win fights. So I think this is going to be an interesting puzzle for him. The second point was on the point that Will mentioned, is that stars make fights, and that was really one of the things that I think in the tape, David Martinez, he's troubled by grapplers mainly. So it will be interesting to see if Rob Font maybe takes a grappling approach, because, and when I say be troubled, I mean they just slow him down. That's all they can do. They can slow him down, but he's basically finishing everyone because he's really explosive. He's very dynamic. But what I like about Martinez, just because he talks about like, or what do people like in the tape, is that you sometimes get these explosive guys who they're powerful, but they don't do much with their shots. He doesn't waste his power. He waits and he finds the moments and he connects, and that's what is in the tape basically. That he's not been troubled so far. I think Rob Font is going to trouble him. I think this is going to be a big step up. It's just that I think there's going to be a speed disadvantage for Rob Font. Yes, he has the reach. But I think speed, timing, power, accuracy, that's what I saw from Martinez. But as I was saying, he hasn't fought someone like Rob Font. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Font approaches the fight.
All right, Garcia versus Gordon is my pick of the my fight of this episode. So I'm really looking forward to this one already. Gordon is coming off a huge knockout over Thiago Moises. To even finish someone like Thiago Moises in the way that he did is huge. I mean, not many fighters have pulled that off. I think Moises has been finished only 3 times by KO, including the Gordon KO. So for Gordon to do that at the age of 36 is pretty damn impressive. And Gordon is really, really good at extending his cardio for 3 rounds and keeping a high pace of activity for those 3 rounds. So he's able to overwhelm his opponents intermittently for those 15 minutes that he's in the cage. And he has the takedown defense and the boxing and whatever to make that to his advantage, really. He does have really, really intelligent striking. He's really good at timing his punches and setting up counters. Although there has been moments in which his punches leave him open to more counters from his opponents. But whenever he does land his right punch, specifically his right punch, because his left hook and left jab are a bit sketchy at times. I mean, they're a bit labored from my perspective. I mean, who am I, right? But anyway, I do think that the most significant strike from Gordon here will be his power side, so his right hook and right straight. His grappling is going to be his best tool for this fight, really, because as much as Garcia does have 7 submissions under his belt, he isn't really someone who recently has shown his grappling skills. So I do expect Gordon to be the one to initiate the clinch, initiate the takedown, initiate the body locks or whatever. And I do think that because of Gordon's cardio, he is going to just wear on Garcia here. Like, I mean, I understand that Garcia has been through some really, really fantastic fights, but ultimately, I just think that Gordon is a bit special. I mean, he is 37 or 36 or something like that. He is up there in age compared to Garcia, but he doesn't fight like at that age, right? He fights like he's still young. And I mean 36 is young still, I guess, but you know what I mean. Like, he hasn't shown that much wear and tear that we'd see in typical older fighters. One thing that I do think that Gordon's going to run into is the pressure from Garcia, though. Like, Garcia is someone who can march his opponents down and just be a menace. And I expect Gordon to use his lateral movement effectively, but if Gordon, if Gordon can't really set up his strikes properly or get his own rhythm going, he's going to be on the bike for most of this fight, and that's my main concern here. As for Garcia, really, he is once again fighting someone who's a fair bit older than him. I mean, he has defeated fighters like Clay Guida and Vince Pichel, so he is pretty much accustomed to beating up old people. And whilst he has those wins against those veterans, he hasn't really shown much improvement anywhere because he has always fought the same way, right? Like, Garcia just marches his opponents down and throws those heavy punches and then just does it again and again until the bell rings or whatever. So ultimately, I just don't know what Garcia has to offer Gordon that's different to what Gordon might expect. And Gordon is really, really good already at preparing for fighters that evidently have a one-dimensional, repeatable style. I am a little bit concerned about Gordon's ability to take punches from Garcia because Garcia does hit like a truck. I mean, that overhand attack from him is fantastic, and it's going to play into his forward motion, his forward pressure, and all that stuff. So Gordon could be susceptible to being knocked down here and there, but I just don't know if Gordon's going to be able to bounce back from that. That's pretty much where I'm kind of like stuck in this thought process. One thing that I do think that Garcia is going to do, though, and which is going to slow down Gordon's mobility, is he's going to attack the body. His propensity to attack the body is relatively high. He likes to mix up the target well, so I do think that Gordon's going to be feeling it after the first round or two. But I just don't know if Garcia is going to really pull it off here. I mean, Gordon is coming off a fantastic win. He has the momentum, and I can't doubt my guy Gordon, man. I mean, I've been a backer for Gordon for a long time now, and so I'm picking Gordon here to win this one. And the confidence, I reckon, would be a nice and snazzy 2, as always. I don't think I've gone any higher than 2 in the last 3 episodes, or any lower than 2. So yeah, another 2. What about you guys?
Yeah, I really like Jared Gordon in this fight. It's a strange one, really, because I think when you think of it at a glance, or when you look at the records and the resumes, it doesn't really seem like there's too much to set them apart, and that it does feel like it's going to be a competitive fight because they're both well-rounded guys and they don't have major weaknesses, either of them. There's no sort of like very aggressively waved red flag on either side. It's just sort of like just that they're not world beaters and that sometimes they get beaten by better guys. But I just think that there are levels to the well-roundedness, and I think that all of those end up pointing towards the same guy, and that's Jared Gordon. So I think that whilst I'm not expecting, some sort of like absolute domination from Gordon where he looks like he should have been minus 1,000 and that he's, like styling on Rafa Garcia. But if they're going to strike, I think Jared Gordon's striking has really leveled up in the last couple of years. He's historically got a very sizable volume advantage over someone like Rafa Garcia. Garcia lands 4.01 significant strikes per minute, whereas Gordon has 5.67. And, Gordon has had the much more difficult challenge of facing a high level of competition as he's been around a lot longer. He's faced his fair share of prospects. He's had his own steps up in competition. So I think to be managing 5.67 is a pretty good number in terms of his overall striking output. And in terms of significant strikes landed per minute, I think is always the next thing to look at. You've got 3.91 absorbed per minute, 3.91 absorbed per minute for Jared Gordon, whereas 4.47 absorbed per minute for Rafa Garcia. So in summary, Jared Gordon is hitting more and getting hit less, which is always something that you like to see. And as I said, all whilst going up against tougher competition. I think his last fight was second last fight against Nasrat Haqparast, where he went to a very close decision, which I think he won, was huge to me, I think, because I really do respect Nasrat Haqparast as a very elite prelim level minute winner. I think if you're going to stand for 15 minutes with Nasrat Haqparast and you're a prelim guy, you're going to lose. Is how I feel about it, basically. And Jared Gordon, I did not think would have the success that he did, but it's a real testament to how his striking has improved. Not only that, but he's also started adding power to his game. I picked him a few months ago when we did the podcast for his fight against Thiago Moises. I did not expect him to be putting him away in round one. But yeah, I think Jared Gordon is on an upwards incline somehow, which is quite strange considering he is, a little bit on the older side of his career. Looking at the grappling perspective, I don't actually think it's going to play too much of a part in this one because both men are competent wrestlers. Either man could probably land a takedown or two, but I think that if that happens, we should probably expect the top position to not be held for too long and that for the get up to be found. I don't think this one's going to be determined by the grappling aspect, but yeah, so I think that kind of just turns it right back to how do things go on the feet, and I think that whilst it doesn't look super obvious that Jared Gordon is going to be superior, I think he's just got all of the things you need pointing in his direction. So I was looking at this fight a week ago, as I like to do things a week in advance, and Jared Gordon was minus 200 at the time. And to me, it felt a bit strange, as I said, because there's no major, glaringly obvious advantage on his side, but it's just kind of going to be a death by 1,000 cuts thing for Rafa Garcia, I think. So minus 200 felt really generous for me. So I've put 4 units on it. I had 3 units on just that as a single, and then 1 unit parlayed with Sam Patterson. So it was a big fight for me, and I think it's now moved to like minus 275. So very happy to have gotten in early on it. I think Jared Gordon should just win a relatively comfortable decision and just look better minute by minute. So that's what I'm hoping for. I also will give this a +1 on the confidence for that reason, obviously.
Yeah, so with the upvote from Will, it's a medium confidence pick in Jared Gordon. And from my perspective, I haven't looked in depth at this fight, but I guess at this point I can only comment on the sort of the betting angle here. Yeah, I think Jared Gordon moving to minus 300, I think he is on my book, just strikes me as a little bit short, because I don't think that this fight is going to play out like it's like a massive difference in skill. I think Jared Gordon's the side for sure. Like I look at this, I look at the records, but I watched a bit of tape on Rafa just to remind myself, because I think it's the problem is right, there is some recency bias. I don't think anyone could argue otherwise, like baked in here, because Rafa Garcia is pretty forgettable, and his last fight was a while ago. Actually, he fought Vince Pichel recently, but before that, he hadn't fought for quite a long time. So he's been relatively inactive. And I think one of the things is that he's quite young, so I think that's always a good thing for an underdog to be. But I think Jared Gordon's coming, as you guys have mentioned, with his momentum, with his hands, with his volume. I like obviously that you use the stats there, because I think that is very telling. When you've got 2 veterans with this many fights, you can rely on the stats. You can. And absolutely, Jared Gordon, for every moment this is on the feet, he's going to be the minute winner. I think that the only question mark I have is, you mentioned the wrestling. I agree, it kind of cancels itself out to some extent. But I think that Rafa Garcia, if he approaches it with like, I want to win this fight, how am I going to win it? He's going to just make it a dirty fight. He's going to have to push Jared up against the cage, not allow him to be clean with his boxing. We've seen Garcia do that. That's something he's competent at. It's just like cage pushing, and he's good at grappling. He can get takedowns. He's never been knocked down. So I think it's a little bit interesting if you think that Jared Gordon's going to finish him. I agree with Will. I think that this is a decision fight. It's a Jared Gordon decision. That's probably where you're going to get the value now if you're going to bet this. But I just can't see. I can't see a lot of value in betting him at like minus 300. Honestly, at minus 200, I felt like probably where it should be. I don't know why I'm not high on Jared Gordon. I think it's because he just does a lot of things well and nothing spectacularly. I know he got the knockout of Moises, but I think that's what I'm talking about when I say recency bias. Like, he's generally not knocking a lot of people out. I think he's just good everywhere. I think he should win this fight. I'm just not convinced that necessarily minus 300 is good value. That's all I'd say.
Okay, so moving on, we have a bout at the lightweight division between Claudio Puelles and Joaquim Silva. For some reason, I've chosen to look at this fight, mainly because the betting line is quite close. It also did just stand out to me because two guys who, off memory, I thought I knew pretty well. So it was where I got started when I was looking at this card top to bottom. For anyone who has done any research so far, the elephant in the room is obviously the fact that there's an 18-month hiatus on both sides. So both guys have not fought in almost 2 years. So I did some digging into why that is, obviously, because that's usually quite key bit of info. Both guys had hand surgery for different reasons. I think Claudio Puelles broke his in his recent loss to Fares Ziam. And Joaquim Silva had just been nursing it for a lot of his career, and he finally got it fixed. Both guys are still training adequately, according to Instagram. I mean, obviously, you always see those pictures that fighters put up. It doesn't really tell us a whole lot. Puelles is at Killcliff, and Silva is at American Top Team. Puelles also does the broadcast booth for UFC Spain. So he does the Spanish broadcast, which I never really like to see that. I think that's a distraction. I think to me, it always looks kind of like, why would you want to get punched in the face and get CTE when you could just do the analysis side of things? You probably get paid quite well and you don't have to take punches to the face. So I always feel a little bit kind of skeptical when guys are juggling both of those things with their career. So that to me is a small red flag. And the only other thing I could see, I doesn't really like bringing it up, but Joaquim Silva's father passed away recently, and it seemed like he took a little bit of time away to deal with that. So yeah, and in total, I don't really take anything major from looking at the hiatus and the reason why the guys haven't been fighting. I think in a situation like this, you could probably pick one of those things, and regardless of what your bias is, or including what your bias is, you probably would find a way to spin one of them as a positive. But I'm not trying to do that. I don't really think there's anything that really stands out, and so I think it's all just sort of a moot point. So what does matter is the skill sets of both fighters. Now, obviously, as I said, 18 months away, a little bit of a higher variance spot simply because. Could both guys have improved? Could things have changed? Yes, they could. But from what we know, Claudio Puelles is a grappling-based fighter. He's all about grappling. His striking is minimal and pretty bad, in my opinion. He usually goes for a high output of takedowns. He kind of has that kind of desperate style where when he's on the feet, you can just tell he's thinking about his next takedown, and he usually will attempt it within 10 seconds of the last one. He landed 7 most recently against Ziam. I personally think Ziam has bad takedown defense, so I'm not too concerned about Puelles' ability to land takedowns. To me, that doesn't mean that he's a great grappler, a great wrestler. I do think he is pretty good, and I think his takedowns should be, landing to a certain extent in this fight. I do expect him to land a takedown or two. And when he does get takedowns, I personally think his top control is average at best. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. When it's bad, it's because he's quite submission over position. When he wants to, when he gets a fighter down, he goes, right, I'm going for it here. He aggressively passes, he makes a mistake and he gets reversed. And I mean, obviously it takes a certain level of competition to be able to capitalize on those sweeps. And we'll get to that in a minute. But he does do some good work, but mainly that is when he maintains position and he doesn't look to advance. There will be some times where Puelles lands a takedown and just sets up shop in whatever position he's currently in, and whilst he's in that situation, he doesn't throw any ground strikes either. So it's literally just positional control. It's wet blanketing, and whilst that is effective in that it stops your opponent from doing anything, and you are technically winning the minutes there, it doesn't count for much in this day and age in the UFC. Damage over control, all that narrative that we talk about. In terms of his submission ability, he does have very good knee bars. We know this about him. He landed he stand up 3 of them in the UFC, which is pretty impressive. I don't think there have been too many over the years. But again, it's quite low percentage, and you really would expect that the more a guy hits a certain type of submission, the more you would prepare to beat it. So, the more he hits, the less likely he should be to land them, I would assume. So that's his grappling. From a striking perspective, I think he just looks in danger anytime he's at distance. I don't think his striking looks good at all, and I think he doesn't have much power to him and therefore struggles to earn any respect. And I think it just kind of creates a situation where he just looks like he's losing every second that he's on the feet at distance, not looking to set up his next takedown, which is why he is so high output in terms of his wrestling and his attempts. He's very hittable, and basically, in short, I think he doesn't have anything in his locker to provide the damage part of the agenda when you're trying to win a decision. And I think that is a big issue here. And I think that ties nicely into what I'm going to say about Silva. But yeah, in conclusion, I think that the only way he can win a fight in the UFC is by hitting one of those submissions that I think are going to become less and less likely, or wet blanketing for 15 minutes. And that is it's a suboptimal game plan these days, because you can lose a round with 3 minutes of control time, 3.5 minutes of control time, if you don't do anything with it. And I've said already that I think that the more he tries to do with his submission over position mindset, he will fumble his top control, and he doesn't throw ground strikes. So I think that Puelles does not have a style that really leans itself to being like good at getting wins in the UFC, basically. I think I don't think his skill set looks very good in 2025. Over to the Silva side of things, the first thing to note is that his nickname is Neto BJJ. He's a BJJ black belt. He has never lost by a submission in his professional career. He did lose on The Ultimate Fighter to, I can't remember the name of the guy, I didn't really look into it that much. He has a submission win over Neil Magny in competitive grappling, which I think is quite significant. And when he fights, he has a very opportunistic guillotine, which he uses very frequently. And in a fight like this, where there's going to be lots of takedown attempts from Puelles, I think him dissuading him with the guillotine is going to be great. I think also in terms of that fight ending intent, I think also another thing that looks good on Joaquim Silva's side. So immediately the first thing I'm thinking is I don't think that a submission for Puelles is going to be on the cards here. I'd be so surprised if he hits a knee bar. I don't think he's going to hit anything on Silva, because Silva's grappling, his BJJ specifically, is very good by the looks of it. So on the feet, as all fights start, Silva is quite obviously the harder hitter. He has a very good ability to hurt his opponents. His conversion rate on his strikes is really high. He has wobbled quite a lot of the guys that he's fought. He rocked Arman Sarukian when he fought him, which is, a pretty impressive win. It was early in Arman's career, so it's not a major point. But yeah, the difference in power and dangerousness when they're standing is massive. Like, you can't overstate it enough. Like, I think if the two of them are throwing strikes, Joaquim Silva must hit like 3, 4, 5 times harder than Claudio Puelles does. So that is significant. He also pulls it on pretty late. His round threes in his last 2 fights have been really impressive against both Drakkar Klose and Clay Guida, who are 2 guys who are very decision heavy. Clay Guida specifically is known for having a massive gas tank, so for him to be like pouring it on against him in round 3 is quite impressive. There are concerns about his volume, I will say that. I know that in rounds 1 and 2 he can kind of do the whole like marching down but not actually throwing a whole lot. That does concern me, I can't lie. That is something that I do circle as a bit of a sticking point for Joaquim Silva. What I'm hoping is that because he has no reason to respect the striking game of Claudio Puelles, that he will let go a little bit. Also, having that BJJ in his back pocket, he doesn't have to necessarily worry about getting taken down here, hopefully. So yeah, looking at how the fight specifically plays out, obviously with all the damage and all the striking being on Silva's side, in my opinion, I think he can win a round with like 90 seconds on the feet if he throws. I think that what Joaquim Silva will do on the feet if he lands on Claudio Puelles should very easily strike anything that Claudio Puelles does on the mat to Joaquim Silva. And then there's also the question of, can he do anything on the mat to Joaquim Silva? Because Silva's grappling has been very good. He's been taken down a few times in his last 2 fights. Like I said, Drakkar Klose, Clay Guida, his last 2 performances, pops right back up straight away. Sometimes voluntarily pulls guard for the guillotine and brings the fight down to the mat himself, pops right back up straight away, uses defense really well. There isn't really much footage in his last 2 fights of him getting flattened out by either of those guys. And I think he's good in a scramble. And you look at the Fares Ziam fight for Claudio Puelles, he's not very good in a scramble. He lost position pretty much every time Ziam got to scrambling. So yeah, overall, I can really see how Silva handles Puelles' best work, but I cannot see how Puelles handles Silva's best work. Because if Silva is on top of Puelles, I think Silva will be throwing strikes. He obviously probably has submissions of his own. We don't really see it very often. But he's going to look dominant with that top control time because he throws heat, whereas Puelles does not. And if they're on the feet, obviously Silva is going to be the more dominant striker, in my opinion, just because of that power. So yeah, like I say, I think Silva can handle the way that Puelles wants to fight, but I don't think Puelles can handle the way Silva wants to fight. So I have my concerns about Silva. I think he is, he is a bit old now, but I mean, look at that picture. He's obviously on all the juice. I think that probably helps him a lot with the age thing. I think the age narrative is not anywhere near as much of a danger red flag as people make it out to be, given that the whole USADA chapter in the UFC is over now. So yeah, I mean, I think I've made it pretty obvious who I'm picking here. Joaquim Silva is the pick in my opinion. The betting line, I understand there's intangibles simply because they haven't fought in a very long time, both of them, and also Silva's getting a bit old. But I just think stylistically it's a really tricky fight for Puelles, and if Silva was the same age as him and that they both fought quite recently, I think Silva should be like up in like the minus 175, minus 200s. I really do. This fight, I bet it for 3 units. I bet Joaquim Silva for 3 units quite confidently when he was minus 125, but somehow the odds have gone back to a pick'em. And I obviously probably need to be disciplined and not invest in it, but I think that Joaquim Silva at pick'em odds is very, very good. And I think that people should be considering backing it for that regard. So confidence level for me is going to be a 2. I understand that this is a fight with some intangibles. So a pick'em odds, I think it's still a very good bet. But if something happens and Silva doesn't look the same, or there's just some sort of added variance, I can't be too surprised. I'm betting on an older guy who's not fought in 18 months. I know what I'm getting myself into, but I just think that if all goes right and we get the fight that we expect, Silva should show it. So yeah, does anyone else have any views?
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to this fight, both fighters are obviously grapplers, as Will said. But I kind of want to take a more casual view on this because I cannot generate the brain power to think of this fight more seriously than as a casual. So, firstly, I'm looking on Topology here, as I always do, and 65% of you guys, not you two, but like everyone else in the world, think Puelles is going to win, and I think those 65% of people who voted for that need to see a psychologist because holy shit, I don't see Puelles pulling anything miraculous off here, only because this isn't EBI, this isn't IBJJF or whatever it is. This is mixed martial arts. This is Joaquim Silva's territory. And Will mentioned that Puelles broke his hand in his last fight against Fares Ziem. When? Puelles punched Ziem less times than we have fingers on our hands, right? Like 4 times he struck Ziem. When did he break his hand? I mean, what the hell's going on? But like, ultimately, I can't care enough about this fight because it's very much it's not a very fun fight to even imagine. I mean, I am taking Silva here because he is the obvious more refined, more well-rounded fighter, but whenever I remember Puelles, I just think of him folding. Like he just doesn't seem like that much of a mixed martial artist. Like I get that he has submissions over Clay Guida and some other people. I think it was Gritzmacher from back in the day. But yeah, I am upvoting it plus wanting it, but it's just one of those fights in which I can't find any interest at all. Like I would rather watch an ant carry a leaf to its nest than think about this fight any more than I am now, so I'm passing it on briskly to Dom here.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on this fight. I was surprised to see the line move in favour of Puelles, to be honest, because I remember I followed his career quite closely. I agree with everything Will said. He just looks like a fish out of water on the feet. He's going to want to grapple here. I'm pretty confident that he's going to come in and do that thing you mentioned. I think he's going to try and wet blanket Silva. Obviously had some success doing that with Ziem. That was a split decision. I don't remember the fight very well. I have to go back and watch it. I think there are red flags with Silva, not just the age. He's not a grappler. I don't know. He has grappling ability, But his preference is to stand. That's always been clear if you watch his fights. He's not interested in grappling. He doesn't do takedowns. I think that it could be greasy because of that approach. Just Puelles going for the grappling early and often, probably failing. And he's going to look bad on the feet for sure. I think another interesting angle, and kind of applies to the Rafa Garcia fight as well, is like this. It's this thing that the conspiracy theory about the USADA, right? The bulk of these guys' fights, Puelles and Garcia, is pre-2023. To be honest, they've only had like one fight afterwards in which they both looked better. I guess I would say. So there's only that angle to consider, I think, and that's not a strong angle, to be honest. That they may be making improvements in things like gas tank. Puelles has really struggled with gas tank. He really gasses out, which is something that he needs to improve upon. He needs to improve upon his physicality, his strength. And yeah, I went on his Instagram as well, and he does look like he's doing a lot of strength training. That's not necessarily going to help him here, but I mean, if he's going for a grappling heavy game plan, it will. So yeah, and I definitely won't be putting any money on this fight. I can definitely see the angle for Silva, and I thought that he should be a favorite, but I don't know how to quantify how much of a favorite he should be. So I guess I could potentially, if he becomes a bigger underdog, I could consider him, but I don't think he will be. I think this will sit in the even money range, and it certainly wouldn't surprise me if Silva wins. But equally, I think if Puelles greases out a decision, I think that's also something that wouldn't surprise me. So let's move on.
Just a final point to make on that. The Fares ZM result, massive robbery on the scorecards there. It was such a clear 29-28 ZM, maybe even 30-27. The first round was very contentious, but how the judges gave one judge gave the fight to Puelles, I have absolutely no idea. Just saying.
This is a fight that kind of looks good. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, I know I harped on about this whole card being a bit rough, but for this fight to be the one of two women fights in this whole card, I'm relatively intrigued by Suarez here because she does have the wrestling background. She does have that whole mystique about her still. I mean, remember back in the day how we all thought that she would be a world beater. But yeah, I don't think she is that much of a world beater. She is facing Lemos, who obviously has the explosiveness and the more craziness about her, but that can only put you so far, really. I mean, I just can't see a scenario in which Lemos wins anywhere but on the feet, and this fight is obviously not going to be taking place on the feet for very long because Suarez is going to be looking for these takedowns over and over and over again. When it comes to Lemos, though, like, she does have good grappling. I mean, she can power her way out of positions, but is it sustainable against a high-level wrestler like Suarez? No. I mean, no, hell no. She's gonna tire herself out more than Suarez is, and all Suarez has to do is just hold it down. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about this one that is going to be confident in either people. Like, I don't think there's. Yeah, I'm just pretty much stuck thinking about this one because it's not a very high level fight, despite both women probably being ranked in the top 5, top 10. I don't even know, and that's horrible of me to say because normally I'm on top of these things, but not today. But yeah, I will probably pick Suarez here, like as a prediction, but ultimately I just can't say much else about this fight, really. So I'm gonna bring it to Will now.
Yeah, I also am picking Suarez. I think that this one feels pretty binary to me in that Suarez is a very good grappler. She's got good wrestling and she's got good top control and she's also got submissions. And the one thing Amanda Lemos has struggled with her entire career is people who want to take her down and keep her down. So in women's MMA, the puncher's chance is obviously a lot less. I mean, Amanda Lemos is one of the hardest hitters in women's MMA today, but the chances of her, it's not like it's Derek Lewis, you know. So I think the grappler should be expected to find her way to her takedowns. And I mean, obviously, you know, this is an interesting spot for Suarez because it's her first time back after fighting for the title shot that we all felt like she had been waiting years for. Like, I genuinely think like the entire fan base kind of gave her the belt from like her first 1 or 2 UFC fights, and it felt like every champion was just keeping the belt warm for when Tatiana Suarez gets there. But obviously she had so many injuries and layoffs that it took so long to get there. And then when she did against Zhang, I can't figure out, I watched it back a couple of days ago, I can't figure out if it was an underperformance from her or if she regressed or if she's just a terrible, or if Zhang's just a terrible stylistic matchup for her, because she did all right in round 1. She was landing her takedowns, everything was looking good, but you could see quite clearly that there was a real physicality advantage on the side of Zhang, and she had the answers, and that if she did get taken down, she knew how to get back up. And Suarez did not look as comfortable holding the position as she usually does. Again, don't know if that's because of Zhang specifically or because of a regression, but the latter half of that is obviously what's concerning here. So you got to ask yourself, you know, is Suarez the Suarez that we know her to be? Also, is she going to be a bit dissuaded by losing that fight because she's been destined to be this champion for so long? And also in the way that she did lose, it was pretty dramatic. It was very one-sided. Zhang looked amazing by the end of it. So like, if you're Suarez and you know that the champion, or you know, the woman who rules the division, I mean, I guess she may have vacated to step up and face Valentina Shevchenko, actually. That's true. Just thought of that on the fly. But like, Suarez is probably in a weird spot mentally in that she's had her big moment and she fumbled it so badly. So like, is she going to look the same afterwards? Or maybe she's going to be revitalized because the division is now up for grabs, in that, you know, Mackenzie Dern and Jandiroba are fighting for the belt, and Suarez could be next, you know? And so that's exactly what I was talking about earlier on in terms of narrative. You can find the same way to spin something completely differently on the same point, depending on what your bias is. But anyway, I just think that Tatiana Suarez should be holding control time here and should be winning. Whether she finds a submission or whether she wins a decision, I don't quite know, but I think she's like minus 400. Is there enough juice to be squeezed there for a woman who, you know, is kind of navigating some more questionable waters in her career? In my opinion, absolutely not. I couldn't be playing minus 400, minus 450 on Suarez, but in terms of picking, I think she should definitely get the job done. So I would be plus one in that.
Yeah, it's a high confidence pick from us. I think that Suarez is the side. I think that she was on a undefeated winning streak until she came across Zhang, if I'm not mistaken. I think she had been she was unbeaten in the UFC up until that point. And yeah, I mean, she'd had a couple of years off, I believe. Yeah, so she fought in 2023. It was basically 2 years until she fought earlier this year in February 2025. So I'm willing to give her a pass in the sense that, you know, that was a long layoff, and her biggest strength is Lemos's biggest weakness. So I'm fully expecting Suarez to come in and just take Lemos down as soon as she can. Not to force it. I think she won't force it. And I think that there's levels here on the mat. I think Zhang had that physicality edge, which meant she could dictate where the fight took place. I don't know that the physicality edge is going to be as big here, especially because Suarez will have had more time in the gym to recover properly. So yeah, I see this as pretty one-sided. I would be surprised. I think the only way that Lemos can win this is the way that she normally wins, which is, you know, to catch Suarez on the feet at some point. But I think that's unlikely. I don't think that you can play this through the money line. You probably have to attack it with props. And so speaking of bets, let's take a look at what we've got.
Yeah, so we've covered quite a lot of the fights that I have bet on nicely for this one. So Diego Lopes, as I said at the start, I just think it's value. I probably think it loses, but I just don't think he should be plus 230 against a similar style opponent. Jared Gordon, yeah, I again touched on that one. I think he just looks better minute by minute and wins a relatively comfortable display. 3 units on that one and 1 unit in a parlay with Sam Patterson, which obviously won last weekend. So high investment there for me. 3 units on Joaquim Silva. In what I would call a rare occasion, I've unfortunately fumbled the line movement on that one. I went in at -125 and he's now like +100, which is a shame. I may look at sprinkling on the round 3 prop for Joaquim Silva just because he really does pour it on late, and Puelles does have some gas tank issues historically, so that could be a fun one, but I won't be going any higher than 3.5 units maximum on that. And finally, David Martinez, which we also touched on. I think +170, which was just an interesting number that a lot of people seem to think was agreeable. Well, was not agreeable, so I jumped in as well. It's +130 now. I couldn't tell you if that's a good line or not, but yeah, that's all from me.
I have Suarez in a parlay from last week with Bukauskas, so that's my main position at the moment. I like Suarez by sub if it's a good number. I want a plus number here. I think it might be worth something. I'm not saying it'll be a big play. Talked about David Martinez. I also took the early line before it moved. I really don't think, honestly, having had sometimes reflect that there's a whole lot of value at +140 for the obvious reasons that he's really taking a big step up in competition. I felt at the high odds, it was worth a punt, but I don't know if I can really condone going down to sort of +130 range. I do think, however, that you could attack it through the decision no action. This is now going to be probably not a great line. If it had stayed at +180, I think the decision no action could have been in the even money range, which I think would have been fantastic value, because I think all the finishing upside here, when you watch Martinez, when you watch him fight, when you look at his defense and how he's able to evade, you just think this, the way that he gets beaten probably is, Font slightly outpointing him or maybe even grappling him, because you can grapple him, but he gets up. The other angle is the 3.5 points, which means he has to win 1 round on the judges' scorecards. That won't be plus money. That's going to be for sure minus money. So that's probably not going to be worth playing. It's probably like -200 or greater. And then the last 2, I'm not super confident I'll play the reads. I've definitely, over the course of discussing, this episode, I think the Diego Lopes plus 5.5 points is not a good idea because it's predicated on it going to a decision basically, and you need Diego Lopes to win 1 round. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I think at this point in time you should probably just be thinking about taking Lopes money line because it's going to be offer more value, I think, than the point spread. I'm not 100% sold. I just need to think about that a bit more. Rafa Garcia, I think this is just predicated on him being able to keep the fight close. He needs to win a round on each of the judges' scorecards to make this bet hit. I don't know if that's value. I have to look at what number you get. You usually don't get good numbers on the point spread these days. If that's minus money, then I probably won't play it. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, a pretty short slate for me, I guess. I mean, Gordon via carry points. I don't know how odds work when it comes to comparing carry points to just points by itself, but I am kind of hoping that carry points is a bit better in terms of odds. Typically for each bet, it's always like 1 unit per bet, but because they're not bolded, I can't bet these because sports bet is so late with its odds and with its props. But with that rant aside, the only parlay thing I can see here hitting is Suarez, Gastelum, and Lopes Silva inside the distance. Like I reckon there's going to be a finish in those 5 rounds of chaos. So yeah, that's it for me.
So we had a good bet that we didn't place. Unfortunately, last week we were discussing the main event to go 3.5 rounds parlayed with Modestus Bukauskas. That was a plus money parlay which we didn't take. So we're still at the same balance that we had the previous week. It's $176. At the moment, we don't have anything that all 3 of us have agreed upon. Although it looks like Suarez or some parlay with Suarez and someone else might be the way we go. If that comes through, we'll put it in the comments below the video.
So there you have it. That is episode 18 in the bag. We're looking forward to watching the fights go down in San Antonio, Texas. And as always, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate all the views, the likes, and the subscriptions that we receive each week. Please feel free to leave comments. Let us know who you're betting on, where you agree with us, where you disagree with us, what kind of angles you see. We always like having discussions back and forth with everybody. So yeah, welcoming the discussion. So we've got a week's break after Noche UFC. But then after that, we're back for our home country event for Josh as the UFC returns to Perth in Australia. We will see you then. Enjoy the fights.